Today we will be beading a Lutheran Rosary. You may be familiar with other types of rosaries. Each follows a specific pattern and is used as a prayer tool. This pattern has 6 groups of 6 and 1 group of 4, making 40 prayer beads in all. Making sure that we have the right materials on our list, the first thing we need is bead wire. I'm going to use a 0.3 millimeter 7-strand bead wire that's 32 inches long. 0.3 millimeters is so that I know that it can fit 4 times through the crimp bead. You'll see that at the end. And the 32 inches in length is because I know the size of my beads. I've measured the size of my rosary that I wish to create. If you are using beads that you don't know their size, you always want more wire to start with than you will need. At the end, extra wire can be trimmed, but it cannot be added. At the beginning, which is also the end of the rosary, there is a cross. I need a cross with a loop end. I also have a single bead, this one's rather large, it's called the Glory bead. This bead sits at the juncture of the loop. Next, I have 7 meditation beads. These beads are smaller than the Glory bead, but larger than the prayer beads. This is actually a tactile system for counting. The color of the beads isn't really important for its use. What's important is that you can tell the beads apart by either size, texture, or shape. I also want 40 prayer beads. These are the white beads in this diagram, and I have not shown you all of them with the arrows because there are just so many of them. But notice that they are all the same size and in very specific positions on the rosary. Next, I have 49 spacer beads. Now, these beads may not be necessary for your design depending on the size and shape of your beads. What they do is make it easier to feel your fingers in between the other beads and makes it easier to count it off. I don't usually even count them on the parts list. I just put out a large tub of beads and pick them out one at a time. The last bead on the list is the crimp bead. It's so small you probably can't even see it here, but it holds the entire rosary together. Other than those, you'll probably need some standard tools like a small set of wire pliers, some wire cutters, and a crimper for that crimp bead at the end. To make it easier, I've laid out my materials here. Here's my 0.3 millimeter 7-strand wire. It's gold to go along with the color scheme that I've picked. So that's my wire. Here's some wire cutters. I use this to cut off 32 inches of it. I know that's going to be about 4 inches longer than what I need, which gives me an extra 2 inches on the end. I also have various beads all in these little cups. And then down here at the bottom, you will see that I also have that little tiny crimp bead, along with the Glory bead and the cross here. It's the smallest bead in the bunch, but it holds everything together. Now I'm going to start beading at this point. You might think we start at the cross because that would seem to be orderly, but it does not work out well if you do that. So start right here with this little spacer bead. The first thing I want to do is make a stop bead. So I take that little bead that I just pointed out and I'm going to put it on the wire, and then I'm going to loop the wire around once so that it stays in place. And this will create a stopper on the end for while I do that inner circle. I can take that off then at the end when I do the end row. I'm going to continue by adding spacers and prayer beads. There will be 6 prayer beads in a row with spacers in between, and then a couple of extra spacers at the end before I put on a meditation bead, and then 6 more prayer beads before the next meditation bead, and I will do this for several groups. To give it a little bit of a Lutheran feel, I actually use the colors or tinctures from Luther's Rose. So the meditation beads are blue, the prayer beads are white, the spacers are gold and blue, there's a Glory bead that's a red heart, and then the cross is dark wood. As a prayer tool, rosaries are used in a tactile manner more than they are a visual manner, so the colors don't actually have to be these. You can do whatever colors you like. I just took a little time ahead of time to source the materials to give it this look. You can see here that I have one group of 6, and then I have a meditation bead, and I'm starting on my next group of 6. I'm now going to jump ahead to when I have 6 groups of 6, or 36 prayer beads and 6 meditation beads. At this point, I remove the loop from that stop bead, making it all one continuous wire. I put the 2 ends of the wire together and center the beads on there, and I'm going to put on some more spacers now, putting both ends of the wire through that spacer. So there are 2 wires going through each of the beads from now on. Some spacers, and then the big glory B, and then some more spacers, and then I will put on a meditation bead, and then some more spacers, along with 4 more prayer beads with spacers in between, a few spacers on the end of that, and then the cross on the end of that, and we'll go through that when we get there. You might notice at this point that it behooves me to recount my beads every so often just to make sure I don't make any mistakes, because by the time I get to the cross and get that crimp bead on there, it's going to be a real pain to go back and change any of the beads. At this point, we're going to start putting the cross on. Now, to put the cross on, the first thing we have to do is actually put the crimp bead on. It's really tiny, and both of those ends of the wire have to go through it once this way, and then we're going to put the cross on, and we're going to put it back through the crimp bead. So the first thing we do is we put the crimp bead on, and then we put the cross on, and then we put it back through the crimp bead. So the crimp bead actually has the wires going through it 4 times, 2 times one way and 2 times the other. And once you have it on the crimp bead, then you want to probably get it there underneath a couple of the other beads going backwards. If you're not familiar with this, you might want to check out other videos on beading, or you might want to get a manual. But to tell you the truth, it's really simple if you just think of it as going through the crimp bead, around the loop on the cross, and then back through the crimp bead and a couple of other beads down. It's not easy to get it back through that crimp bead. That's why our wire is so small, because the crimp bead is so small. But we need to get them back through it so that in the end you get what amounts to a knot. And we're going to pull it down through a couple of other beads to hide that end, and then you have to work it down. You have to work your wire tight without breaking it over and over again. So you push a little bit up, and you pull a little bit back, you push a little bit up, and you pull a little bit back, and at the end you might want to get out a couple of pliers just to pull it a little bit tighter. At this point, I'm going to check for any other slack in the line to make sure that it's all pulled through all of the beads, because once I use the crimper on that crimp bead, it's all going to stay in place, and any extra space that I have on that wire is going to just be loose and dangly, and I don't want that. So I'm going to go through the whole line over and over again just to get it nice and tight. Once I have it just the way I want it, I pull out my crimper. This is my crimper, and it has 2 little spaces in there. One has a little divot in it and the other one doesn't, and I use the divot first to make it flat, and then I use the one on the outside that's rounded, and I make sure that I smash that crimp bead down, and it's going to hold all the wires in place. Everything depends on that. Then I use my wire cutters to trim off the excess wire that came out through 2 or 3 beads beyond the crimp bead, and I have the finished rosary. It looks like this. And then all I have left over are the wire cutters and the crimper. Basically, everything else was used. As I previously mentioned, it's not the color of the beads, but rather the size, the shape, and the texture so that you can tell the difference between the beads that is important. These all follow the same basic pattern. They're Lutheran rosaries. They have the same number of meditation beads, prayer beads. They each have a glory bead. They each have a cross in the same order. If you put enough spacer beads in, you could even make one the size to be a necklace. Now I'm going to talk a bit about how to use your Lutheran rosary. Just like any other tool, when you pull it out of the box, or in this case my little pouch, you're going to want to read the instructions. You know you want to. You may already be familiar with Catholic rosaries arranged in groups of 10. This Lutheran rosary is arranged in groups of 6 with 4 prayer beads at the beginning. With our fingers, we start at the cross, we go down 4 prayer beads, 1 meditation bead, then there's a glory bee at the juncture. After the juncture, we follow the path of least resistance down the prayer beads, and then a meditation bead, and then the prayer beads and a meditation bead, until we go through all of the prayer beads and the meditation beads, ending on the last meditation bead on the circle. Then at the juncture, we go down again past the glory bee, past the meditation bead, past the 4 prayer beads, and onto the cross where we started. The key use of a rosary is for prayer and meditation. You use your fingers to feel the beads to help you count and remember your way through your prayers. Here we can use the rosary to pray through Luther's Small Catechism, one section at a time. We begin by meditating on the cross. Here we have John 3:16 that we recite at that point. Then we have a verse from Luke that we pray on the 4 small beads. Then for the larger meditation bead, we have either Luther's morning or evening prayer. We have another prayer for the glory bee at the juncture, and then a verse from Job to pray on the 6 prayer beads, the first ones on the loop. For the meditation bead, we recite the 10 Commandments. And then when we finish, we have another prayer. The next group of 6 is for meditation on the Creed and follows the same pattern. We have a prayer for each of the 6 smaller prayer beads, and then on the large bead, we recite the Creed. After that, there's another prayer, this one from Mark. The next group of 6 is for meditation on the Lord's Prayer, using the same basic format. The sections after that each deal with holy baptism, confession, and the sacrament of the altar. Each of these sections follows the same format until you come back to the juncture and the glory bee. Once we have prayed all the way around the circle, we come back to the glory bee, and there are prayers then for the glory bee, for the 1 large bead that's the meditation bead, and for the 4 small prayer beads. We end back on the cross where we began. You may wish to include a rosary in your prayer life. You might even consider changing your prayers seasonally. Using the same or a similar format, you might even develop your own prayers using the rosary. Prayer beads come in many different formats. This is just one that you might consider. Like any tool, it is meant to be used, and perhaps even personalized.